Welcome to another episode of the Breaking the Game show on the Nothing But Net channel on Dash Radio. I'm your host for the show, Kenneth, and I'm joined here today by the Hoopers. We got Jon and Fresh in the building. How you guys doing today?
Feeling good, man. How you doing?
Good to be here.
Definitely. We're creeping up on the NBA season starting and just a few weeks away now, so we're starting to get into some more discussions about these teams and how they're going to perform this year. But I want to remind our listeners that this show is sponsored by MyBookie. Use the promo code OFFTHEBALL in all caps at sign up, and MyBookie matches up to 50% of your first deposit and up to $1,000. Sign up and let's win big. So we're going to get right into things. We've got Steven's player rankings later on. We're talking Southeast Division today. But first, we got to talk about the man that got the bag. And Michael Porter Jr., he signed a 5-year, $207 million deal. I could use a couple of those millions myself. So, fellas, what do you make of the extension for Denver? Do you like the extension? Do you think it's a bit too much for Michael Porter Jr.? What are your thoughts on it?
Right. When you first see the deal, you probably think, wow, that's a lot of money for he just played his first full kind of season being involved, but the potential there is through the roof. He would have been the number one pick, you could argue, if it wasn't for the injury. So you kind of see why they want to lock him up and build on what he did this year. But I could understand people who think it's a lot of money because it is.
That's definitely a lot of money, especially like say he could have been the number one pick if it wasn't for his back injuries, which we still just played his first season, so we still don't know if the back injuries are going to be a problem for him. But I think Denver is looking more at the reward side than the risk, because when you have a player that this talented, that this young, to go along with the rest of a team that's young and talented, I think the oldest player in the starting five is probably Will Barton at 28, 29-ish maybe. Mm-hmm. And you got an MVP in Jokic. You have to take this risk because the reward could be out the roof if you think about it. Potential championship team if they can stay healthy and keep them together, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look at his numbers last year, he's a 54% shooter at the wing position. Like he's special in the way that he can score the basketball at times. I think, a lot of people's concern is obviously the back injury. It is just 1 year that we saw him do that. So can he do it over a long period of time? And he's going to have the opportunity in Denver this year. We know Jamal Murray is going to be missing probably the entire season, if not the majority of it. So he's going to have to step up. It's going to be him and Jokic that they're going to be leaning on every night in Denver. And I think he's got an opportunity to have a career year here. He's one of those most improved player favorites this year, just because I think you look at the opportunity. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if he's a 25 point per game scorer this year. Like, I think that's his ceiling this year, given the fact that you got to distribute those shots that Jamal has, and he's going to take the majority of them, I would assume. So I think he's got that potential. I really like him as a player. 207. I mean, you look at some of the other guys that are getting 207. He kind of has to live up to it looking at some of those names there. But I think he's got a great opportunity to do it in Denver. So looking forward to seeing what he can do there and wishing him nothing but the best. Hopefully this isn't the last big contract that he sees in his career.
Right, yeah. And the key, though, is you see the 207, but he has some incentives to hit to get the full 207. Yeah. So that's still, keep him motivated to get that extra $30 million. But yeah, it is a lot of money, but the potential is there. And I agree with you. The shots are going to be there. And he just had the second most efficient season in NBA history behind Wilt with his shooting last year. So he can average 25 per game is definitely a potential that can happen this year.
That's why I think I got him around about that 23, 25, because he has been working with Steph. Like I said, that back is going to be a problem for some moves, but when you're 6'10", you can shoot over most players at your position. It's not going to be too tough to get there. And he's he's efficient. Like, he's overly efficient if you think about it. Like 54% for a wing that's mostly a three-point shooter.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty scary thing about that potential.
Yeah, and the back injury is just the main thing that held him out. I mean, you got to prove it when you get to that level, but people looked at him as a person that was going to be a perennial all-star. So, I mean, if you followed him, Missouri, and in high school, some of the things he's doing doesn't shock a lot of people, and they think he's only going to get better, for sure.
Oh no, and watching his high school tape, like you saw immediately why he was as highly touted as he was before the
Right.
injury. And now that he's getting healthy, like when he was getting drafted, people were concerned, like, is this another Harry Giles situation where like a guy has a ton of potential in high school, then he goes to college, gets hurt, and then he's got some issues in the league. But Porter Jr. is just another animal as far as what he can do on the wing, and really impressive to watch him. So we're going to move over now. We're going to start focusing on the Southeast Division, the Hoopers Division, as I understand it. You could say that. One of the stronger divisions in basketball, too. I mean, you got 4 of the 5 teams in that division were battling for a playoff spot all year long. You had Atlanta that went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Huge shout out to them. You have Miami, who made the NBA Finals the year before, got swept by Milwaukee this year, but they re-upped in the offseason. We're going to get into that. Washington lost to Philly in the first round. And then you've got Charlotte, who they were in the playoff hunt until LaMelo got hurt for a lot of the year. So they're another strong team. And then you got Orlando at the bottom. And I don't think we're going to be focusing too much on the Magic, but they did make a couple draft picks that we might touch on here. So as far as the division went, you can see it on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. The Hawks won the division by a game last year. Then you had the Wizards that were 7 games back. Charlotte was 8. And then you got the Wizards all the way down there, 20 games back in a shortened season. So that's going to be even extended this year. But what do you guys make of the division last year, how it shaped out? We saw Atlanta obviously make that deep run. So what did you think of the division as a whole?
Yeah, go ahead. The division as a whole, I think with certain players being out for a lot of the year, Westbrook for Washington, Jimmy Butler for Miami, I think having Trae Young being able to play the whole season honestly was the biggest advantage for the Hawks winning it, because they basically had the best player in the division healthy all year. Even when they went to some rough patches, they were able to hold on because they had, like I said, Miami was just a little bit off with Jimmy Butler out there, which threw their whole season off, and Trae Young and the Hawks were able to capitalize on that. And then the other teams were just like Charlotte's still a pretty young team, and they just happened to catch a lot of teams by surprise, honestly. And I think a lot of that goes to LaMelo Ball and what he did as a rookie and his winning Rookie of the Year last year. It was a weird season last year overall, just because it was a short season and you never knew who was going to be available because of COVID. And I think the Hawks just took advantage of that for the most part, just having a fully healthy team. They didn't really run into any COVID problems. I know, there was certain injuries, Cam, Dino here, but we had the best player in the division all year long last year. And you usually don't lose like that, honestly, especially in the regular season.
Yeah, it was a weird year for Miami. I'm sure a lot of people were disappointed in them. They were at kind of the bottom of the league for a good amount of the year, especially with Jimmy out. So I think that was the biggest surprise. And it was a lot of ups and downs throughout the division. I just talked about Miami, then Atlanta started hot, then they, went bad for a while, injuries, fired the coach, then bounced back and finished the second half of the season with like the best record in the East, second best record in the East, something like that. Orlando came into the year wanting to compete for the playoffs. Then Markelle gets hurt, and eventually they trade Gordon and Vucevic and break it all up. And Charlotte is definitely who caught everybody by surprise. Bringing in Gordon Hayward, LaMelo played great his rookie year. But in the end, Atlanta kind of took off, and then Charlotte stuck around, and the LaMelo injury kind of killed him. Plus, Gordon missed some time too. Yeah. But LaMelo's injury kind of killed the team. So Atlanta was able to, once they made the change for Nate, they got some stability there, and they just took off from there. And they still got a ways to go. But they're gonna be tough going into this year, the division that is, because I think Miami is trying to get back to the finals. So it's gonna be a good year.
Sure. Definitely, and we're gonna touch on in a second on some of those moves that Miami made, because they definitely re-upped that roster from last year. The Hawks, when they made that choice to move to McMillan, it felt like it was just a completely different basketball team. Like, they were near the bottom of the league as well, and then, as you said, second half of the year they were really impressive. So shout out to Nate McMillan, who was unjustly fired in Indiana as well. He was not the reason why those teams were getting bounced in the playoffs. It was a lack of talent more than anything else there.
Right.
And then you had Washington. You had that duo of Beal and Westbrook that unfortunately is broken up now, but they were going out there every night trying to drop 60 combined, 70 combined to win games. And it was it was a fun team to watch, but it's going to be a way different roster in Washington this year. You had Charlotte with LaMelo Ball, who I wasn't that high on going into the draft. Clearly, I was dead wrong on him because he finished Rookie of the Year. And it was always the shooting concerns with him. Everyone knew that he was the distributor. He could do all that stuff, but could he shoot it well enough? And he did. And he's going to continue to get better in that aspect. And he seems to be a lot more level-headed than what we saw out of him in high school. So that's always impressive. And that's just a maturity thing more than anything else. And then, of course, you've got Orlando. They got gutted at the deadline. They traded Vucevic. They traded Fournier. They traded Gordon. Terrence Ross is probably sitting there like, guys, like, you could have traded me too. Like, you left me with this team. What the heck? But unfortunately for him, he's still there, and he's one of those guys that I would keep an eye on at the deadline this year because I would imagine Orlando's going to try and move him out as well. But, yeah, let's talk about some of those offseason moves. We're going to start in Atlanta. I mean, we saw their draft was really solid. I mean, for them to get Jalen Johnson and Sharif Cooper, tremendous value on both of those guys. They both slipped in the draft, so I think that's going to be huge for Atlanta. And then you locked up John Collins, 5 years, 125, paid the man, but he deserves it based off of his production and what he brings to the table for Atlanta. And then some smaller moves in there as well. So what do you guys make of Atlanta's offseason? How do you feel about it? Do you think it elevates this team, or do you think they're going to stay put with where they were at last year?
Yeah, I think they definitely elevated. I think, making those key moves in the draft to get two players that I think a lot of people think could have went higher. You have people that was really high on Jalen Johnson, think he could have won in the lottery. Some thought Sharif could have been the first-round pick, and he was able to steal him in the second round. And I think both of those players are going to contribute to the team this year easily. We need some help in point guard, and not knowing about injuries with DeAndre Hunter and Cam, Jalen Johnson fits right in at the 3-4. But then also locking up John Collins for 5 years, 125. It was a little back and forth for a second. His agent tried to play a little hard ball, but in the end, he got the deal that he wanted. And then I think another key was, paying Capella, and for one, to lock him up and just show some appreciation of what he did leading the league and rebounding last year. He didn't make an all defense. He didn't make all NBA. He wasn't an all-star, but he's a key piece to the team. I think he basically averaged 15 and 15 last year. Yeah. And he's a top 10 center in the NBA. So you bring those guys in, you hope everyone comes back healthy, and you try to build on what they did last year because they caught some people by surprise, but Atlanta's definitely going to be a target this year for sure.
Sure. Yeah, I'm starting with the John Collins thing and signing Clint Capella as well, giving him an extension. That definitely shows that we're trying to build on what we already did last year and just have that stability, bringing Nate Mack. I think signing Nate as well as the full-time head coach should also go into one of those offseason moves. And it just shows that we're going to be stable. Can't forget the trade, signing Max extension as well. So I don't think the Hawks ever tried to show off this much stability in the past years, honestly, not even with those Joe Johnson, Josh Smith teams that were going to the playoffs every year.
Well, they kept their cores together. They kept the core.
They were satisfied with being an average team. That's true.
They kept the core.
But like I say, going out and then getting two players in Jalen Johnson and Sharif Cooper, who brings much needed young talent and depth because injuries happen. We saw that with Cam and DeAndre for most of the year. It helps perfectly, honestly. And then you got a young player like Sharif who can learn from Trey and Lou Williams on the fly and contribute to some point guard minutes. I think we can get Eastern Conference. Like I say, we got there a little bit of luck because we caught some teams slipping and going through some emotional and mental team things as well, trying to figure some stuff out. We did beat the Knicks in 5. Shout out to Ken for reminding people of that every day. But I think the Hawks built on just that stability and keeping it there, and that shows players like Trae Young and John Collins that we here for y'all. We're going to do what we think is best for y'all to win, for everybody to succeed. Yeah,
I really loved Atlanta's offseason. I think, as you said, like they did get some luck last year with teams getting hurt and things of that nature, but I mean, shout out to them for getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. Doesn't matter how you do it. They made it there, and they gave Milwaukee some games. I mean, they definitely did. So it was really entertaining to watch them last year. You talked about Capella, top 10 center by far. Like, I think he's just a guy that doesn't get enough love. I put it out there on Twitter yesterday as one of those guys that's just underappreciated because if you're 15 and 15, like, what more do you want out of your center in today's NBA where it's all about shooting, it's all about guard play? Like,
Right.
he's just a great piece for Atlanta. And I think Atlanta looked at it and said, we lock up Capella, we lock up Trey, we lock up Collins, and then we just see what we have in these young guys with Reddish and Hunter, and now they've got Johnson there. They've got a ton of young guys on the wing, and if any of those guys turn into what we think they could be, then you could have something special in Atlanta. And I like the fact that, you know, there was a lot of talk of, well, Atlanta might go and make a trade and trade some of these young guys to bring in another star. And it's like, well, if you already have a potential star in your room, like, why are you going to rush it? Like, Trey's young, Collins is young, Capella's still pretty young. Like, just ride it out and let this Brooklyn team kind of do its thing, Milwaukee do its thing, and then in a couple years' time, you could have something really special in Atlanta. Miami went the complete opposite, though. I mean, they decided, you know what, we're going 1-2 years, and then I think they're thinking they're going to be blowing things up outside of Bam because they had a busy offseason. They brought in Kyle Lowry, 3 years, 85. They brought in re-signed Duncan Robinson, 5 years, 90. A lot of money to pay for a shooter, but he is one of the very best at what he does. And then they went out and they got PJ Tucker. They got Markieff Morris. Both guys that I think are really going to buy into that Heat culture of defense and toughness and all that Riley wants them to play. And then you already had Butler, you had Bam, you had Hero. They did lose Kendrick Nunn, which was, I think, kind of a shame. I really like him as a guard. I'm happy to have him in LA, but it is a shame for him to be gone from Miami. So what do you guys think of Miami's moves? Do you think that they've made enough to potentially make an Eastern Conference or NBA Finals run?
Yeah, I actually think they do. I think because they brought in players like Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker who have that championship experience now, and they can pass it on to the players who've been to that championship game but didn't win it, like Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. They know what it takes to win. And I think another part of those offseason moves, I think Victor Oladipo still being on the team as well. I think that helps add a little more scoring, some more veteran presence and defense. I think overall Miami probably did just as good a job as anybody in the offseason with the moves they made. I think Markieff Morris is going to add that extra layer of toughness that sometimes they were missing a bit with Jimmy Butler not being out there. And Bam does need a little more protection up front, and Markieff Morris and PJ Tucker can provide that. Jimmy Butler is Jimmy Butler. He's going to come out there and outwork everybody for the most part. Duncan Robinson at $90 million is a lot, but when you do your main thing better than most people do, I can't argue. I can't argue against you. Shooting is at a premium, and you need shooting always on the court. And he's going to be a player that's going to be on the court a bunch of times for that roster because they just need shooting out there, honestly. And right now, he's their only. Him and Tyler Herro are their two best shooters.
Yeah, I'm not mad at them paying Duncan Robinson, but it could look real quick like Davis Bertans. So we just gave him 85. We just gave him 85 to shoot, and he forgot how to shoot for a good amount of the season. But I think Duncan is more consistent than Bertans. I think he can live up. Duncan is a real life sniper, so I think he live up to the money. They kind of did like the Laker thing and made old moves also. You kind of don't look at it that way, but they've gotten, if you think about some of the players they added, Markieff, PJ, Kyle Lowry, they all have been part of the last like 3 championships. So it's good to bring that in because you just got to have that mindset. I think Oladipo works really well for this team because he's not going to look to carry anything. So maybe that helps with, his minutes being lower and keeping him healthy. Because if he's healthy, that's an all-star player you got coming off your bench, or even if he has to start. I probably will start him. I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet. But either way, having him on that team is helpful. So I definitely think they compete for the championship in the Eastern Conference and try to make it to the finals. The East is just so tough with the Bucks coming back. And, of course, you got Brooklyn or whatever. But they're right there because Jimmy, I think, is one of the best closers in the NBA. I don't think he's going to run away from any matchup, whether it's James Harden and KD or, trying to go against LeBron again. So having him as your leader, Kyle Lowry is a player that he plays his role really well. You saw what he could do with a player like Kawhi. Jimmy's kind of in that mode a little bit. So we can see what happens with that. And Bam is the ultimate X factor to me because he might be the most talented player. Jimmy's the most important or whatever. But Bam could do so much for them, and he could be a game breaker any night. So Miami they look good. They're definitely in position to compete. Hate that they lost Nunn because he's, have that youth there. you lose none, and they lost Precious. I hate that they traded Precious because they probably could have got Kyle Lowry without the signing trade, but it helps with the money, so I get it. But I hate that they lose none because they also lost Dragic also.
Yeah.
So you definitely gonna need Tyler Hero to, play well this year because on top of shooting, he's probably gonna have to handle the ball some too. But Miami looks good, and Eric Spoelstra is probably over the years he's become like one of my favorite coaches in the NBA. Early you see him with the Heatles, and you wonder how good of a coach he really is. And then just through the things he's been through over the past few years, I've gained a lot of respect for him. I mean, Pat Riley has always handpicked him, so that says a lot about him himself. So I definitely think they're trying to make a run, and in the next couple of years, because I think Pat might be about done also. So he want to get one more before he get out of there.
Yeah, this is definitely Pat's kind of last 2-3 year run of them potentially winning another title. And I mean, the Lowry deal, I think it's good for the first couple years, and they're hoping that even if by the last year maybe Kyle starts to peter off a bit, they're hoping Hero at that point has figured it out so they can have someone to kind of jump in and maybe have Lowry come off the bench at that point. But at least for now, I mean, he played well in Toronto last year, and I think he's going to be a really important part of this team. A team that also had a lot of changes, and I don't know if it was in a good way, was Washington. So they went out. They had a busy offseason as well. They traded Westbrook. They brought in all the other Laker guys in Kuzma and Harrell and KCP. They went and got Spencer Dinwiddie. They brought in Holiday. This is just an interesting team for me because we know they have Bradley Beal, who is top 5 scorer in the NBA, like just an all-around talent, playing that shooting guard, small forward type position. But this team, for me, they could be the 8th seed in the East if they all play well together, or they could be the 13th seed in the East just because there's just so many question marks around guys like Kuzma. Can he return to form before LeBron had got to LA? Dinwiddie coming off the injury, will he get back to where he was? Because people forgot he was a really talented player prior to his major injury. You've got guys like Harrell who were 6th man of the year. Can he figure it out with Washington? So what do you guys make of the Wizards heading into this year?
I completely agree with you. Like, I can see Washington being as good as like the 6th seed, because if players play the way they're capable of, like Dinwiddie has averaged 18. We've seen Trez average 18, win 6th man of the year. Brad averaged 30. We've seen Kuzma average 18 and be a good player. You got Hachimura on the team, Denny, who they drafted last year. Thomas Bryant is coming back. So it's some pieces there where it could be some talent there, but I could also see him finishing at the bottom of the league. Like, it could go bad. The defense could be terrible. Who knows what the rotations are going to be health-wise, because you're dependent on Thomas Bryant and Spencer being healthy. I think those two being healthy will matter as far as how good this team is. And then, just really seeing how can Bradley if he can really carry a team as the best player, not necessarily carry to a championship, but even just in the playoffs and avoiding that play-in game. So they could be really bad, or they could be a really solid team where he's like, all right, let's make some trades and we're better. So I'm definitely interested to see how it plays out. And then Scott Brooks is Scott
Brooks not there no more.
Scott Brooks isn't the coach anymore. Excuse me. So moving on from Scott Brooks, moving on from Scott Brooks and bringing in Wes Unseld, you got to kind of figure, what type of coach he's going to be, because this is his first head coaching job. So, what positions he's going to put the player in, the offense, his defensive philosophy and stuff like that, because that's what's lacked the last few years is the defense. Because I do think they're going to have some offensive firepower because KCP, a 3-and-D player. Like I said, Trez is average 18. Kuzma can get buckets. Dinwiddie can get buckets. Brad just averaged 30. So the offense could be there, but they're going to have to step up defensively. So I'm interested to see the Wizards. Like, when they play the Hawks, I'm trying to go to the game because it's going to be a high-scoring game. So I want to be there.
Yeah, we got 135, 133 incoming in those games, baby.
It's going to be a high-scoring game. So this team could be really fun, and they're going to be in the middle, or they're going to be really bad.
I think it's all the way around. I do think they have 6th seed potential just because of how much offensive firepower they have.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, I can see them being the number 1 pick in the lottery at the same time because I just don't know how well the talent is going to mesh together, honestly. Like, Montrezl Harrell is a good, 6th man. Kyle Kuzma does. in these situations where you need scoring, Kyle Kuzma can provide you 18, 19 points off the bench. Spencer Dinwiddie, if fully healthy, thinks that him and Brad can be an all-star backcourt. I don't know about that much, but I think Spencer is good for 18 and 6 for you and about 4 or 5 rebounds. Getting Thomas Bryant back. I think the Wizards are got a lot of potential, just talent-wise. I just don't know if they're gonna put that talent together. And another player who they got at the trade deadline, Darius Gafford, who's gonna be. I think that's where some of the defense is gonna come from. He is gonna be a good rim protector, shot blocker, and him and Thomas Bryant could work there together. I just don't know if it's gonna be enough defense because Montrezl Harrell is still a little undersized. Kyle Kuzma is kind of small for his position at that stretch. For KCP is a good wing defender, but then it's Spencer Dinwiddie and Bradley Beal gonna be good wing defenders as well. So anywhere between 6 and 13 is quite possible for this team. And like you said, bringing in a new coach and just working on that. Is he going to just let them go offensively and then figure it out defensively, which could play into some 135 to 133 nights? Or are they going to, because they have good defensive potential. Like Spencer Dinwiddie's a big guard. Bradley Beal has that potential. I just don't know if they're going to fill out to that potential and actually go out there and do it. But they can make the playoffs. They can make the playoffs. Yeah, I don't know how far they can go in the playoffs.
Yeah, as you guys said, with the new coach, I got to lean more towards the 13 seed only because I don't know what it's going to look like. And I look at some of these other teams that have a bit more established, and it might take some time to figure it out as well, because we named all those guys that they brought in, and really there's like 1 or 2 of them that are defenders. So like, is that enough for them to even get down to like, because they were probably bottom of the NBA defensively, but can they even get to like 20 to 25 in the NBA as far as defense goes? Because that could go a long way for them, because last year it was like there was a highway to the rim all year long. Like guys were just blowing past Russ and Beal and no one was there. So it was like, okay, there's another layup. Like, so I'm curious to see how it's all going to work. I hope it works out well for Unseld there. But yeah, just a lot of moving pieces in Washington. And then the last 2 teams in the division, we've got Charlotte. They had a pretty quiet off season, but they did make a couple of nice moves. I mean, they made a nice pick in the draft, and then they also brought in, they traded for Mason Plumlee. They brought in Kelly Oubre as well. So a couple moves that kind of round out this roster that, as we talked about earlier, they were in the playoff hunt prior to LaMelo getting hurt. Gordon Hayward looked like an all-star prior to him getting hurt. Now the question is, can both those guys, especially Hayward, stay healthy for an entire season? Because Hayward, we know, has had injury troubles his entire career. And then when you look at Orlando, really all you can talk about as far as their offseason goes is the draft, because they went and they got Jalen Suggs, they got Wagner out of Michigan, a couple young guys that are going to play a lot of minutes because there's not a whole lot else there. I mean, they'll bring back Jonathan Isaac, who was hurt. Fultz got hurt. Anthony missed some time, but this is a young roster that I think is going to go through some growing pains. They did bring in a new coach in Mosley, so I'm curious to see whether he's just going to be one of those guys that's going to have 1 or 2 years where he struggles and then they're going to move on to another coach, or whether he's a guy that can instill a culture in Orlando that really has been lacking since the Dwight Howard days in Orlando. So what do you guys make of those 2 teams' off seasons?
Yeah. To start with Charlotte, I think Charlotte lost Devontae Graham also, which I don't think is a big deal, because I think they were getting to a point where they wanted to choose which 2 they were going to keep between. I mean, obviously LaMelo was going to stay, and then it came down to Rozier and Devontae Graham, because they tried to play them all together at certain points, and it just didn't work. I think one of them was going to have to go. So I like them. I like the rookie point guard that they brought in. I can't pronounce his name, but I like him coming in because he's going to be good leading that second unit. But I think Charlotte's looking at this year trying to see some growth in Rozier and LaMelo, and one of them making their first All-Star game potentially, because Rozier was really good in like clutch situations for them. He averaged 20 points last year. He was a good fourth quarter scorer. And then LaMelo just was like a firecracker for the team. He brought everybody's energy level up, had a great partnership with Miles Bridges. He even worked well with Bismack Biyombo, and he just had everyone feeling good. And then you brought in a professional in Gordon Hayward, who's pretty much made the playoffs his whole career. So that just helped up people's mindset, because, a lot of people got on Charlotte for signing him, and giving him the money, but he proved to be worth that money just from what he did on the court and just helping the organization look respectable. So
Sure.
Charlotte, you want to see growth, and then maybe a mid-season move comes in because they have some players there. Of course, you got LaMelo, and you're hoping he could be an all-star this year. I said Terry Rozier. But you're also hoping Miles Bridges takes that next step also because he's a really consistent player for them, and you want to see him just continue to get better. I think Kelly Oubre looks better for them this year than he did in Golden State.
A lot better.
I think he's going to look good this year. I think he's going to be more focused this year. I think he got a little bit more to prove. So Charlotte, I think they're going to be there because I think their players are going to get better. So I definitely had them in the play-in game range. As far as Orlando, it's just a matter of saying which young players you want to keep on the team, really who fits. How does Markelle Fultz look? Because he looked good last year before he got hurt. He looked really good. Mm-hmm. But you bring in Suggs, who a lot of people are really high on Jalen Suggs. Some thought he could be, the top guard taken in the draft. So, but you also got Cole Anthony, who he was the number one player coming out of high school. He has like alpha potential, and he got to run the team a little bit when everybody was hurt. RJ Hampton is in. He said he grew 2 inches, so he's 6'6" now instead of 6'4". So it's just like a lot of talent there. So I think in Orlando, they're just going to see who fits what we're going to do, and then you're going to move on from some of the others and try to put some pieces there. But this year, they're probably playing for the draft, honestly. Playing for the draft and seeing what players fit what they're doing.
No, yeah. I would have never thought that Mason Plumlee would be the biggest signee for a team. But I think Mason Plumlee is a big step up from Cody Zeller because Cody Zeller just didn't work in the pick and roll with LaMelo Ball. Him and Bismack Biyombo just don't have the hands to complement LaMelo, honestly. And I think, bringing in Ish Smith as a backup point guard also works. Charlotte is probably one of those teams who were fighting for the play-in spot last year, who probably just didn't make enough off-season moves to be right there again. I do think some of their rookies, James Bouknight and JT Thor, are going to provide some things for them, especially JT Thor just as another rim runner to back up Miles Bridges and Kelly Oubre and get some of those spot minutes will help a lot. I don't know if they have enough shooting, honestly. LaMelo Ball proved that he is that he can be a consistent shooter last year. Terry Rozier got up his shooting numbers last year. Gordon Hayward is a consistent shooter, but we don't know if he's going to consistently be in the starting lineup. And just to run those pick and rolls with LaMelo Ball, you got to need at least 2 shooters out there with him at all times just to spread the court so you can have Mason Plumlee and those big men diving to the rim last year, which was their biggest offense last year, him and Miles Bridges connecting on pick and rolls and just getting Miles to the rim just to dunk on people. So losing Malik Monk and Devontae Graham probably was 2 of the biggest losses just because those were your shooters, honestly, if nothing else. Orlando, like he said, it's just who's talented enough to stay on this roster for the long haul and who's going to be healthy enough because nobody's talking about Mo Bamba anymore. We just going to throw him out the window. Yeah.
And I was high on Mo Bamba, but he got to show something.
No, that's definitely true, but Orlando just doesn't have the experience to try to even make noise. While they do have some young players who can win some regular season games for, we did see Cole Anthony hit a game winner at some point last year. But I just don't know if Orlando is just have enough age on them to even try to compete, even for a play-in spot. Let's just not be too bad this year. Like, let's show some growth this year. Maybe, we try again next year and be a little better.
Right. And Charlotte, you got to remember they got PJ Washington also, so you expect him to step up and have a bigger year this year.
Yeah, a lot of young players on both of these teams. A lot of young players on both of these teams. I do think that Charlotte has the potential to be in that playing game, as you guys talked about. But I'm very interested to see if Orlando even wins 20 games this year. Like, that's just not a good roster. And we forget, their record last year, I think it was 21-51. The majority of that was with Vucevic and with Gordon and with they may not win 20 games this year in a full schedule. So I don't even think it's a bad thing if they lose a lot of games. Go through your growing pains, go get another top pick. Hopefully Suggs is what we think he is. Hopefully Wagner is solid for you guys on the wing. And this is a big rebuild for Orlando. This is 3 to 5 years. It's going to take them some time at minimum if they do it right in order to get back to competing. So this is not a team I'm going to be watching, no matter who the opponent. But I'm sure there's going to be some league pass highlights and NBA highlights from some of these games. So shout out to those teams. But as far as predictions for the division, I think Atlanta's going to win the division this year. I really do. We saw Nate McMillan when he came in last year, how different that team was second half of the year. And I think Miami takes a bit of time to figure out these new pieces that they've added. So I've got Atlanta 1, Miami 2. I think Charlotte's going to be the third seed in the division just by a couple games over Washington. Like, as we said, they could be 6, but I'm leaning more so towards 13 in the conference. So I got Washington at 4, and then Orlando a very distant 5 in this division. What about you guys? How do you think it shapes up when the year is all said and done?
Ooh, I think Miami's health is going to really determine if Jimmy Butler can be there all year. But yeah, I got Atlanta going number 1, just with Trae. Like, Trae Young's still the best player in the division, and having all those contracts sold up right now definitely helps that stability. Miami number 2. Charlotte and Washington is a toss-up because, like I say, Washington could either be really good and finish right there and could probably compete with Miami, or they could be really bad and kind of competing with Orlando. So I'm going to go Washington number 3 just off of pure faith in Bradley Beal and the talent they got there.
That's fair.
I'm going Charlotte 4th because I think even though they did sneak on some teams last year and some teams going to be expecting them, I think they still going to be able to sneak some wins out against some of the better teams. And like you said, Orlando is just culture building at this point. Like, let's just try to build a good culture and get some of the good playing habits into some of these younger players, and we'll go from there. So Orlando's definitely going to finish last in the division.
Yeah, I go back and forth with Atlanta and Miami because I think they both are competing for that top spot. But I think Atlanta will win the regular season division title. Shout out to Zach from Off the Glass Pod. He says that Atlanta have 2 of everything. And so they do have a deep team. And just building off the momentum from last year, I don't think they're going to be complacent with what they did. So I have Atlanta at the top, Miami and Miami following them. Both of them 2 are kind of close. Then a little distance between them. And I'm going to put Charlotte 3rd. I expect LaMelo or Terry Rozier to compete for being an all-star this year. So that helps. And just not knowing what's going to happen in Washington, I like Wes Unseld Jr., but we got to see what the roster is going to do. So got Washington 4th and way back there, way back there. I got Orlando. Like, I agree with you. Like, I don't know if they're gonna win 15 games this year.
I think I was being generous with 20. Like, this is a bad roster, and there's we're expecting like Jonathan Isaac to like come back and be really good, and it's like I don't know, like, it's a major injury. Like, I like him as a player, but
he's going to be out for injuries, and he's not going to be able to play because of COVID vaccine issues in certain places. So
it's going to be
Orlando at the way back. They're trying to figure out what player we want to keep, and I hate it to have a new coach, and that's what you're kind of coming into because it's not even a direction with the young player you want to build around. So he has to really build that up, and like you say, so he has to kind of put his culture down quick, or he will be out of there in 2 seasons.
The casual fan's going to look at their record last year, see that they only win like 15 games and be like, wow, we really got worse. And it's like, you guys don't understand that all the good players left. Like, what do you mean? We lost Vucevic, we lost Gordon, we lost Fournier. They all went and got paid elsewhere. So,
exactly.
I mean, it's just a tough situation for Orlando. So hopefully they win 15 games. I mean, we'll be a little optimistic on that, but not holding out too much hope as far as that one goes. But we're going to get right into our player list now. Before we get into it, I want to remind our listeners to go and check Play Pickup as well. They're a sponsor of the Off the Ball Network. It's a free-to-play. All you have to do is enter your phone number to sign up. You make your picks for games across various sports, including basketball. You earn points, and you can win some sweet prizes in the process, including gift cards to Fanatics and a bunch of other great prizes. So definitely go and check them out. They're a great sponsor for Off the Ball Network. But we're going to get right into our player list. Now, we've been going through our top 100 player list over the last month or so. I have my list. Steven has his list. Shout out to Steven, who's unfortunately not here, but he does have his list. And so we're allowed to dissect his list while he's gone. But today's episode, we're going to be looking at his top 25 through 11 player list. If you guys remember the last time we talked about Steven's list, it finished off with Karl Anthony Towns at 27, Zach LaVine at 26. So now we're going to get into the top 25. So we'll talk about players 25 through 21. So at 25, we got Russell Westbrook. I mean, he was incredible with the Wizards last year. The team wasn't necessarily incredible. They were just barely able to squeak into the playoffs. But he gets a lot of hate because people talk about his sporadic shooting and things of that nature. But he's a great distributor. He's a great rebounder for a guard. He's in a new situation in LA, so we're going to see how he's going to fit with LeBron and AD. He's going to be that third guy there. Hopefully he understands he's going to be that third guy there, potentially the second some nights, but we'll see how that all mixes together in LA. He's got Bam Adebayo at 24. Just a really all-around good player. He's a good defender on the back end. He distributes well. Offensively, he could be a little bit better, and I think that's something that he's going to develop over time if he can step out and shoot some because he's more of a mid-range guy. So step out and hit the three and stuff like that. I think you give him a couple years and he'll get there. But overall, 18, 9, and 5, like just fills the stat sheet every night. Bradley Beal at 23, 31, 4, and 4 guy. The Wizards are going to go as far as he takes them. We talked about that in the division preview, so we don't need to go too far into Bradley Beal. Rudy Gobert at 22, probably the best defensive center in the NBA. He's one of the best rebounders, pretty limited in his offensive game, but they don't lack scoring in Utah, so I think he's one of those guys that's kind of in the perfect situation. I think he would get exposed if he was in other situations because they would need him to do a little bit more. And then he's got Kyrie Irving at 21. I mean, we know he's one of the most gifted ball handlers, one of the best finishers around the rim, probably of all time at the point guard position. The question with him is always about availability. He's never played a full schedule. So when he's out there, we know how good he can be, but how many games is he really going to play? So, guys, who's a player that you think is a little bit too high or a little bit too low on this list, or do you like the list as a whole so far?
So far, I like the list overall. I think Kyrie's too low. I probably would have Gobert. He's a little too high to me. But overall, I think he has people kind of in the right position. Gobert is easy to overlook because of his offense, so I don't think he should drop like past 25. I just probably would have Brad and maybe Westbrook ahead of him. And I think Kyrie should be in the top, at least the top 20 of the NBA. But I can get why he's there because, as you said, availability is key. And Kyrie, like I said, he hasn't played a full season his whole career. So that kind of matters. You know, the game speaks for itself also, though. But I'm not mad at this list at all. I think I like what he's doing there. Bradley Beal, it's probably an argument for him in the top 20 also, but he kind of has to show. We know he can score, but once you get in those top 20, that's the players that's actually impacting kind of winning too. On a different level. Yeah. So I think that's what plays a part in Bradley Beal. Plus, it's not like calling him a lot.
And I know when Steven and I were talking about our list beforehand, we wanted to value like the winning side of things as well, because I think a lot of the time people are like, how do you not have Bradley Beal like top 15? Because look at his numbers last year. And it's like, but with those numbers and another all-star caliber guy, they were barely the 8 seed. So like, I just want to see a little bit more on the defensive side. I know you can't control the team around you sometimes, but, you know, in your play, if you stepped up a little bit on the defensive end, you might win a couple more games. You might move into that, 6-7 range, and then we could start entertaining that discussion. So I understand his reasoning there. John, what about you?
The only ones I really have a problem with just Kyrie and Westbrook. I think Kyrie is a top 20 player. I think Westbrook, coming off another triple-double and help lead that was team to the playoffs, should be closer to that 20-22-ish range. Like Rudy Gobert could just drop maybe down one, honestly. I think Rudy Gobert's defensive value is a lot higher than a lot of players' offensive value, honestly. Like, I know it showed in the playoffs where it's like, well, Terrence, they kind of took advantage of it, but they don't get that number 1 seed without Rudy Gobert, honestly, and what he does defensively. Kyrie Irving, like I say, the game definitely speaks for itself. I understand the availability point. I truly do. When you got a player that when he's out there is 27, 90, 50, 40, I got to put him closer to the number. I got to put him in the top 15. I'm sorry. I'm not disagreeing with that, though. Like, he has to be on the court. You've always said that, like, you have to be on the court to do it. But when he's out there, he's doing it. And you can't argue against that, truthfully. Bam got a little way to go, but he's about right where he should be, like, say, just expanding on his offensive game and just being more aggressive. I think that's what kind of killed Miami a lot last year. He just wasn't as aggressive as he could be, waiting on Jimmy Butler and Dragic and all those other players to get going. But other than that, I mean, me and Steven kind of don't see eye to eye with all this, but I don't have a problem with it so far, honestly.
All right, so we're going to move on, starting with number 20. He's got Chris Middleton at number 20, and I think a lot of this has to do with what they did in the playoffs last year. We look at Middleton's numbers. They weren't any better than they were in years past. He was 26-5, but he did a lot in that NBA Finals, and I think he went from just being like a solid shooter, borderline all-star, to a big-time shooter. Like, he hits big shots in big moments. We saw that down the stretch in a lot of those games where that's not Giannis's strength, and he really stepped up his rob and really performed. So he's got Middleton at 20. He's got Paul George at 19, 23-6-5 last year. I mean, the playoff P moniker kind of went away last year after the way that he played, especially when Kawhi went down. He really stepped up for the Clippers. He's a great two-way player, hits big shots. I mean, what more can you say about Paul George? He's been doing it for a long time. He's overcome some major injuries, and with no Kawhi this year, I'm going to be interested to see how well the Clippers do without him, because he's going to be missing a lot of games this year. At 18, he's got Zion. Zion's a 27-7-3 on 61% shooting in just his second year in the league. Like, the guy's an absolute monster in so many ways. He's a force athletically. Once again, though, the Pelicans haven't won a lot of games, so I want to see how it's going to translate this year. And I think Steven's interested to see where it's going to go this year as well. And he's got Chris Paul at 17. I mean, he took a Phoenix team that was a non-playoff team to the NBA Finals last year. And yes, Devin Booker got better, Ayton got better, but a lot of that has to do with what Chris Paul did for that team. So I think Steven's rewarding him for that, having him at 17. And then at 16, he's got Jimmy Butler, just a great two-way player, really going to lead that Miami team this year. So who's a player that's too high or too low for you guys as far as 20 through 16 goes?
I wouldn't be mad with switching Paul George and Jimmy Butler, honestly. I think they kind of do some of the same things. I think Paul George playing better in the playoffs and just throughout the whole season overall kind of has, that kind of leaves credit to that. Zion is the one that I can't really complain about, honestly, because no, New Orleans isn't winning. But when you out there 27-7 on 60% shooting, it's like, oh, I'm gonna let you have that for now. You're a young player, especially second year in the league. Like, you can have it. Like, that's what you're doing. Clearly, your individual potential is out the roof already. That you're doing this without an offense that's really catered to you or a team roster that's really built to your best strengths. So it's like, just to do that is amazing without a 3-pointer as well. Chris Paul, he can't. I don't have Chris Paul that high anymore. I understand how he affected winning, but I also think just Monty Williams and everybody else on that team taking another year and just being better. DeAndre Ayton, especially what he did in the playoffs. Devin Booker was always Devin Booker. Mikal Bridges is probably one of the bigger factors on that team being better as well, just stepping up as a 3-and-D player. And Jay Crowder brought a lot of experience to that team and toughness, which that team needed as well. So I'm not mad he got Chris Paul in the top 20. I just want to have Chris Paul in the top 20.
I think just like you weigh on players for losing. Some players get too much credit for winning, and that's Chris Paul. I don't think he's a top 25 player in the NBA no more. He's not top 25 no more.
Damn.
But I get why he has him there. I understand the argument. The three is for me is Chris. I'll take out Chris Paul, Zion, and Chris Middleton.
Taking out Zion?
I would push him at least under Paul George and Jimmy Butler at worst for Zion, because the Pelicans are terrible. And Zion does what he does really, 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 really well. But he still has some development to go. I think Zion's top 25. I don't know if I have him top 20 yet.
That's right.
Especially over like Kyrie, Westbrook. I don't know about those two. And then like Chris Middleton, he's kind of, it just depends on what space you're in, because some people really love him and some people really don't think he's that great. I think he proved himself in the finals, so I like him in the top 20. I think he's good where he is. I think Jimmy Butler, I said my hot take for last year was just when he's available on the court, he plays like a top 10 player. Not that I'm putting him in the top 10, but he plays like a top 10 player. So I like what Jimmy is. And I also have said in the past that I feel like Paul George has like all the talent to be a top 5 player. He can shoot, he can dribble, he's a good defender, he can facilitate, he really can do everything, but it's always been something missing there. So he gets a chance to prove it a little bit this year. So I think Jimmy and Paul George should be like at the front of this 16 and 17, and everyone kind of followed them from there. And Chris Paul, he shouldn't be in the top 25. I might say that Chris Paul top 30 though, because you can't discredit what he does, but
for sure.
I don't got him in front of Kyrie, Westbrook, Bradley Beal, Gobert. Bam, no, not right now. Not anymore. Not anymore. But respect what he did.
That's fair.
Okay. So we're going to get into the final 5 players here. We'll quickly rapid fire them off, and then you guys can chat about them. So Devin Booker at 15, all based off of the NBA Finals last year and everything that he did. He was just phenomenal. Donovan Mitchell at 14 led Utah to the 1 seed. Just a special player at 26, 5, and 4. Then he's got Trae Young at 13. 25, 9, and 4 last year, took the Hawks to the Eastern Conference Finals. So a lot of this is rewarding winning, I think, as far as Steven's list. Anthony Davis, he was hurt last year. He had probably a down year at 21, 8, and 3, but still a special two-way player when he is out there. And then the one that I disagreed with was Kawhi Leonard at 11, only because of the injury, because we know when Kawhi is playing, he's a top 10 player. He's just phenomenal what he does on both ends of the floor, but 25, 6, and 5 guy there at the 11 spot. So what do you guys make of the list? Too high or too low on certain guys?
Yeah, Kawhi definitely. I have him. I still think he's top 5 in the NBA. Anthony Davis could be top 10, but I understand why he's there. He also has some availability issues and just got to show the consistency. I like putting the young guys in there because they're making a wave in the NBA. So I'm not mad at Trae, Devin Booker, and Donovan Mitchell because they're next up. Even if it might be a little too early, I think by the end of the year they could prove that they're next up. So I only got a complaint with Kawhi. Kawhi's top 5 in the NBA. But injuries play a factor in these lists, so I get it.
No,
I think that's his main reasoning, because Kawhi is hurt. Like, it's tough because he's probably only going to play like 15 regular season games, if that. Right. So that would be the only reason why, because, I agree. Top 10, top 5 when he is available.
Definitely. Same. Kawhi's top 10 player when he's ready, but injured. Anthony Davis is always the tricky one because he is somewhere between. Like, he could play anywhere between
1 and 12.
Yeah, 1 and 12, honestly. Like, that is how he plays. Sometimes he can be the best player. Sometimes he is the 12th best player. Trae, Donovan, Devin Booker, all in the right spots. I think that you could flip flop Donovan and Devin Booker. It's just depending on which style you like more, honestly. But outside of Kawhi, there's no real problem with these 5 players, truthfully.
Respect to putting the young guys up there, because we all hold on to the older players a little bit, but them boys is doing numbers. I mean, you got to respect what they're doing. And their teams are winning. Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals, number 1 seed in the league. So I respect
full disclosure for my list next week, as far as 15 through 13 go, all the same names, just different ways that they're positioned. So, you got to give a shout out to the young guys. They've been playing really well, and we saw them having an impact on their teams last year. I think it's time we start rewarding that. We gotta get away sometimes from these guys that have been in the league for a long time, and I mean they're proving that they're the next guys up, as you said. But guys, this was a ton of fun. It was great having you on Breaking the Game this week. Where can the folks find your work at home?
You can find us anywhere podcasts are available. Just look up the Hoopers Pod. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google. Then, of course, find us every Monday and Friday on the Nothing But Net channel through the Dash Radio app for the Hoopers Hour. We're on at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And every Friday for the Hoopers Morning Run on the Off the Ball Network's Facebook page, the Hoopers YouTube page, and the Hoopers Twitter page, 9 a.m. Friday for the Hoopers Morning Run.
Awesome. Really appreciate you guys coming on the show. Stay tuned next week. We're going to be having our Pacific Division preview. That's my division and my Lakers. So we're going to get into talking about how well they're going to mesh with those three players that we mentioned earlier, as well as my player list 25 through 11. Already given a spoiler that I've got 15 through 13, three of the names there. So definitely something you're going to want to check out. And check out everything at Off the Ball Network. There's some of the best content out there as far as NBA and every other sport out there. So this has been Breaking the Game show on the Nothing But channel on Dash